In a recent survey, a majority of Americans, 56%, would not be able to cover an unexpected $1,000 expense with the money they have in their savings. So instead of drawing on their savings, they would be forced to go into some type of debt, credit card, title loans, that type of thing, in order to pay for that $1,000 unexpected expense. How about you? Could you cover that $1,000 surprise without going into debt? If so, congratulations, you've got to start on an emergency fund. If not, then we need to talk about the fundamentals of emergency funds. Coming up right now. Hey everybody, Mark here with Money Fundamentals, and we're here to help you gain the essential money knowledge you need for life. Okay, we just talked about that $1,000 surprise and whether you could cover it or not out of savings. If you can, great. If you can't, then you need to work on your emergency fund, because a lack of adequate emergency savings can cause you to go into expensive debt like credit cards, title pawn, personal loans, those types of things, in order to cover an unplanned expense. Things like unplanned car expenses or home repairs, unemployment, job change, helping a family member, all qualify as an emergency and ideally would be covered by funds set aside for just those types of things. The problem is when you haven't adequately funded your emergency fund, you risk potential financial turmoil whenever you encounter an unplanned expense. So instead of calmly paying for it out of a fund that you set aside for it just in case, you cause further financial stress and worry by going into debt, or worse, in order to take care of that. So that's something we want to try to avoid. So today, we're going to cover what the emergency fund is, how much you might need in the emergency fund, how to find the money to put in the emergency fund, where to keep that emergency fund, and most importantly maybe, when to actually use your emergency fund. But before we get into the details of emergency funds, take a quick second to let us know that you are finding this video helpful by giving that like button a little nudge to help others find this channel. And also, if you're not already a subscriber, we'd love to have you as part of the community. So go ahead and subscribe so that we can help you make the most of your money. Okay, so what is exactly an emergency fund? Well, it's a designated account that is used to cover unexpected, irregular, unplanned expenses. So this type of cash account, think of it as like a bank savings or checking account. That's the type of account that an emergency fund is going to be in order to cover these unexpected, irregular expenses. The important thing is that these unexpected expenses are not discretionary expenses. These are essential expenses, things that you need in order to keep everything on a level playing field. Okay, now that we've determined what an emergency fund is, the next question, maybe the most important one in a lot of people's minds, is how do I determine how much is in that emergency fund? Well, everybody has different needs and requirements when it comes to how much money they should have in an emergency fund, but there's a couple of guidelines that I'd like to give to you and let you think about a little bit. First, at a bare minimum, you should have at least $2,000 in your emergency fund. Now, I know a lot of you may have seen over the years suggestions that start off with $1,000. Now, $1,000 is better than no dollars, but I really think, especially today with inflation and everything that's going on, and will probably continue for the foreseeable future, I just don't think $1,000 cuts it anymore. So that's why I say $2,000. And the reason I say $2,000 is that should be enough to cover the typical things like getting a flat and needing a tow and a couple new tires on your commute. Maybe replacing a small appliance in the home, like a dishwasher or an oven or a refrigerator that goes on the fritz. Maybe something like covering 1 month's rent or maybe 1 month's mortgage payment. $2,000 is the bare minimum, and we should work to get to. The next level up, once you've gotten to that $2,000, the next level is to try to get to somewhere between 3 to 6 months essential expenses in your emergency fund. Now, everybody's going to be different. If your situation is such that you don't have a lot of responsibilities, maybe you are a renter instead of a homeowner, and you're in a job that is fairly in demand, so it would be easy to find new employment if you were laid off, you might be able to stick closer to that 3-month side of things. If, on the other hand, you have some additional responsibilities, maybe you have a mortgage, maybe you have a family, or maybe your job is such that it's more specialized and it takes a little bit longer to secure new employment, you probably want to tend closer to that 6-month end of things. In some cases, entrepreneurs, people starting businesses that have very variable income, highly variable income, maybe commission or a very large portion based on bonuses, people like that oftentimes will have 6 to 12 months expenses in an emergency fund just because they know that things can be that variable. Okay, next on the list is, okay, we've established how much maybe we should be shooting for based on your own unique situation. Next question is, how the heck am I going to find the money to get these dollars in this emergency fund setting aside? Well, we all have to start from somewhere. So once again, with a lot of things, money, just getting in the habit and getting started doing something is much better, much better than the alternative of doing nothing. So take it one step at a time, one bite at a time, and eventually you'll work your way through it. The main idea, I think, to get started and will kind of help you start adding to that emergency fund, especially if you're at a very low amount or zero, is to get in the habit of saving. Whatever amount you can save, get in the habit of doing that. Maybe it's $20 a paycheck. Maybe it's $50 a paycheck. Maybe it's $50 a month. Whatever it is, get in the habit of doing that on a regular basis and have the money that's designated for your emergency fund to go to that emergency fund account, which is going to be a savings or a checking account, something that is in cash. It's not going to earn a big rate of return. That's not the idea. It's there just in case. So get in the habit of doing that. Once you kind of get in the habit, start looking for ways to increase the amount that you can add to your emergency fund over time. A couple of good suggestions might be to take a certain amount from each paycheck, maybe it's $50, $100, whatever it is, and have that money specifically go in and try to increase that amount every quarter, every half year, every year, whenever you get a bonus. Look for opportunities to bump that contribution up. A thing that works for a lot of people very, very well is to take any type of bonus or raise or anything that they get that's over and above your baseline and apply that directly to where you need to save the most right then. So if you're starting your emergency fund and you've got $100 in there and you get a raise and that increases your weekly paycheck by $50, take the vast majority of that $50 and apply it to that emergency fund to get that built up as fast as possible. And then once you get to the level it needs to be, you're good. Then you can take that money and reallocate it or give it another priority, have it go somewhere else that is where you need it to go at that particular point in time. So we've determined about how much of an emergency fund we need. We've gotten in the habit of finding the money to put into the emergency fund. Now the question is, where do we keep that emergency fund? You might be tempted to put the money for your emergency fund in your regular investment account, or to say, I don't need an emergency fund. I'm contributing to my 401k at work. If something comes up, I'll just take a loan against that 401k. You don't want to do that. You want to separate your emergency fund from your investment funds and the stuff that is being saved for long term. Keep the emergency fund in an insured cash account like a savings account or a checking account. Do not put it in an investment account, because the last thing you want to have happen is to be investing your emergency fund in the IRA that you have buying mutual funds or the stock market, and right before something happens, the stock market goes down 15, 20, 30%, and the money that you thought you had in there is now 30% less because the market went down. You want to be 100% sure that that $5,000 or whatever that emergency fund amount is in cash and ready to be accessed in an emergency. Next, when should you use that emergency fund? Well, if you have a properly defined and planned for emergency fund and funded it based on your unique needs, using it's going to be fairly straightforward. In general, emergency funds should only be used for real emergencies, things that you really can't plan for or expect. Well, you might be saying, yeah, thanks for that, Captain Obvious, but it really is that straightforward. If the expense is not something you can't reasonably plan for, it comes on suddenly and is something that needs to be taken care of or covered immediately, then the emergency fund comes into play to cover that expense. Okay, now that you know the basics of the emergency fund, take a look at what you have in your savings account. Could you take $1,000 out of that without a problem? If so, hey, you've got a good start on an emergency fund. Congratulations. If not, then this is where you start formulating a plan to do what you can to add to that savings account on a regular basis. In both cases, continue adding to the emergency fund until you get to at least that $2,000 level, and keep adding to it until you get an amount that meets your individual needs. Like I said before, try for at least 3 months of essential expenses. All right, that's pretty much it for this video. I hope you found our discussion of the emergency fund helpful and gave you some ideas on what you can do to establish your own emergency fund to help you get through those times in life where stuff happens and we need to pay for it. If you found this video useful, go ahead and subscribe and click that thumbs up to help other people find the channel. Thanks for watching, and until the next one, take care.